They tell you to be the good man, to play fair, to act with honor. But the good man often stands in the ruins of his own integrity, watching jackals feast on the rewards of his restraint. He played by the rules of a game that never existed and paid the price. What invisible law did he violate? The one that separates the victim from the victor, the one we are forbidden to speak of, the law that states victory is its own justification. This is the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And in this world there are two kinds of people: those who are slaves to the idea of fairness and those who have become masters of reality. The slave of fairness lives in a prison of his own making. The bars of his cage are forged from words like should and ought to be. People should be honest, he tells himself. Hard work ought to be rewarded. They should play by the rules. He speaks of justice as if it were a physical law like gravity. He expects a cosmic referee to descend from the heavens and punish those who transgress. But the whistle is never blown. The heavens are silent. His indignation, his sense of being wronged, becomes his entire identity. It is a fire that gives off no heat, consuming him from within, leaving him bitter and paralyzed. This man is predictable. His emotional reactions are a map that his enemies can read with ease. They know that an act of blatant unfairness will not provoke a strategic response but a moral outrage. They know his outrage will blind him, making him complain instead of calculating, making him protest instead of preparing. He brings a rulebook to a knife fight and wonders why he is bleeding. He believes his adherence to a noble code is a sign of superior character. Sun Tzu would call it a fatal strategic error. The master strategist teaches that the general who blames the terrain for his defeat has already lost the war twice over, first in his mind and then on the battlefield. The landscape of human interaction, in business, in careers, in life, is your terrain. It is not flat. It is not even. It is filled with mountains of ambition, rivers of hidden influence, and swamps of deception. The slave of fairness stands at the foot of the mountain and declares it shouldn't be there. The master of reality begins to climb. The first principle of power is to see the world with cold, diamond-hard clarity. It is to accept the terrain as it is, not as your moral compass wishes it to be. This is not a call to abandon morality. It is a command to adopt a higher, more effective one. This is the code of the strategist. It is a fundamental shift in your entire operating system. You must cast off the comforting illusion of a fair world and embrace the liberating logic of victory. The master strategist Sun Tzu understood this principle in its deepest sense. When he wrote "All warfare is based on deception," he was not merely giving permission to lie. He was stating a fundamental truth about reality. That perception is the battlefield. The man who is a slave to fairness announces his every move, telegraphs his intentions, and believes transparency is a virtue. He is an open book, and in war, an open book is a dead man. The master of reality understands that true strength lies in being formless, in being unknowable. His silence is a weapon. His calmness is a shield. He does not waste energy lamenting the injustice of a situation. That energy is a precious resource to be channeled with absolute focus toward a single point, the achievement of his objective. This is the new morality. It is not a code given to you by society, by teachers, or by scripture. It is a code you forge yourself in the fires of your own ambition. The only question this morality asks is not, is it fair, but does it lead to victory? Victory, in this sense, is not the crude crushing of an opponent. It is the sublime triumph of your purpose. It is the successful imposition of your will upon the world. To adopt this code is to declare your independence from the emotional chains that bind the masses. It is to understand that the greatest injustice is the one you commit against your own potential, when you allow a naive and childish notion of fairness to hold you back. The world does not reward the man who plays fair. It rewards the man who wins. The strategist knows that true morality lies in effectiveness, in achieving the mission, in ensuring the survival and prosperity of his own interests. He is a surgeon of circumstance. When a surgeon cuts into a body, is it a violent, immoral act? To the uninitiated, perhaps, but to the surgeon it is a necessary, precise, and highly moral action, because the objective, The victory over death and disease is the only morality that matters in that room. You must learn to become a surgeon of your own life, cutting away the cancerous tissue of wishful thinking and naive idealism. For the first act of power is to abandon the rules of a game you are destined to lose. True morality is loyalty to your own triumph. Comment, "I define the rules" to claim your power, and subscribe to master the art of reality. You have taken the first step out of the cage. The chains of fairness lie shattered at your feet. But freedom is not a destination. It is a new, more demanding territory. To navigate it, you cannot use the maps given to you by your former captors. You must forge your own compass, learn to read the true landscape, and develop an armor that makes you impervious to the emotional storms that shipwreck lesser men. This is the arduous work of forging the morality of victory. It is not a set of rules to be memorized, but a series of disciplines to be embodied. These are the foundational laws of real power, etched not in stone, but into the very fiber of the strategist's soul. They are the principles that separate the master from the novice, the architect of circumstance from the victim of chance. The first of these laws demands that you sever the strings that allow others to make you dance. This is the principle of focus, the absolute and unconditional abandonment of external validation. The common man is a hollow vessel, desperate to be filled by the applause and approval of the herd. His sense of self-worth is outsourced, placed in the careless hands of colleagues, rivals, and the anonymous crowd. He is a puppet, and his strings are pulled by their opinions. A word of praise makes him soar, a whisper of criticism sends him plummeting. This desperate need is a vulnerability of the highest order, a gaping wound in his psychological armor. A savvy opponent does not need to attack his fortress. He need only attack his ego. By offering or withholding approval, the opponent can steer him, manipulate him, and lead him into carefully laid traps. Sun Tzu taught that a general must be the master of his army's morale. But first, he must be the absolute sovereign of his own. If the general's spirit rises and falls with every rumor from the barracks, he is already defeated. The strategist, therefore, undertakes a great severing. He performs a ruthless amputation of his need for the world's good opinion. This is not an act of arrogance, but of profound strategic clarity. His validation becomes an internal process, a closed circuit between his actions and his mission. The only judgment that matters is his own, measured against a single criterion. Does this advance my ultimate purpose? This creates a gravitational center within him. While others are tossed about by the chaotic winds of social pressure, he remains anchored, immovable. He can make the hard, unpopular decision. He can walk a path that others ridicule. He can endure isolation, knowing that it is the price of sovereignty. This internal focus is a source of immense quiet power. It allows him to dedicate 100% of his psychic energy to the task at hand, while his rivals waste half of theirs trying to manage their image. The man who needs no applause is free. He cannot be bribed by praise or blackmailed by criticism. He operates from a citadel of self-knowledge that is unbreachable. Once your inner compass is calibrated, you must learn to read the world not with your heart, but with your eyes. This is the principle of perception, the mastery of the real terrain. The slave of fairness sees the world through a filter of his own ideals. He sees a landscape of what should be and is constantly shocked and dismayed when reality does not conform. The strategist discards this filter entirely. He becomes a cartographer of what is. He understands that the terrain of human interaction is never a level playing field. It is a complex topography of power dynamics, unspoken hierarchies, hidden anxieties, and primal ambitions. What the naive man calls unfairness, the strategist calls information. A colleague's flattery is not a sign of friendship, but a signal of his desires. A superior's sudden silence is not an insult, but a change in the strategic weather. The strategist learns to read the subtle currents of human psychology with the same skill a sailor reads the ocean. He sees the ego as a lever, fear as a pressure point, and ambition as a current to be redirected. Sun Tzu's insistence on knowing the terrain was not just about hills and rivers. It was about understanding the psychological landscape upon which all conflicts are truly won or lost. To master this principle is to stop judging reality and start using it. You do not resent the mountain, you find the pass. You do not curse the river, you build a bridge or find a boat. To the strategist, a seemingly unjust situation is merely a complex problem awaiting an elegant solution. This requires a state of hyper-awareness, a detachment from the emotional narrative to see the underlying mechanics. It is the ability to walk into a room and not just see people, but to see a web of relationships, loyalties, and tensions. It is the power to listen to a conversation and hear not just the words, but the intent behind them. This perceptual mastery gives the strategist an almost psychic advantage. He anticipates moves before they are made. He sees the trap being laid while others are still admiring the bait. He doesn't need to break the rules because he is playing a different game, one dictated by the unwritten laws of power and psychology that he alone has taken the time to decipher. With a focused soul and clear eyes, you must now forge your shield. This is the principle of immunity, which manifests as strategic apathy. This is perhaps the most misunderstood and powerful tool in the strategist's arsenal. It is not a cold, unfeeling emptiness. It is the conscious and deliberate control over emotional response, transforming it from a vulnerability into a weapon. The average person is a reactor. Their emotional state is a direct consequence of external events. They are provoked and they rage. They are threatened and they fear. They are praised and they beam. Each reaction is a broadcast of their internal state, a trove of information for their adversaries. The strategist learns to sever this connection. He becomes a black hole for provocation. An insult is thrown, it vanishes without a trace. A threat is made. It is met with calm, analytical silence. This is the embodiment of Sun Tzu's formlessness. An army that marches in predictable columns can be ambushed. But how do you attack the fog? How do you strike the water? An opponent who faces your strategic apathy is fighting a phantom. He pushes and meets no resistance. He shouts and hears no echo. This is profoundly unnerving. In his frustration, desperate to elicit a response that he can understand and counter, he will escalate his efforts. He will become more aggressive, more emotional, and in doing so, he will overplay his hand and reveal his true weaknesses. Your impassivity becomes a polished mirror, reflecting his own agitation back at him, amplifying his own errors. Defensively, this immunity preserves your most valuable resource, your mental and emotional energy. Outrage is exhausting. Fear is draining. Vengeance is a fire that consumes the one who carries it. The strategist remains a placid, deep lake, observing the storms on the surface without being disturbed in his depths. He does not grant his opponents the power to dictate his emotional state. His peace is his own, and from that place of inner stillness, he can think, plan, and act with a clarity that the emotionally compromised can never hope to achieve. This trinity of power, an internal compass that renders external opinion irrelevant, a perceptual map of the world as it truly is, and an emotional shield that makes you formless and immune, is the foundation of the morality of victory. It is the code that allows you to move through the world not as a passive participant, but as a deliberate and unstoppable force. You have forged the instruments of a new morality, the focus that makes you independent of opinion, the perception that allows you to see the hidden mechanics of the world, and the immunity that makes you a formless, untroubled sea. But a sword, a map, and a shield are useless if the hand that wields them trembles. The most sophisticated arsenal is worthless if the general is a traitor to his own cause. Now begins the true war, the one from which there is no retreat and for which there are no reinforcements. It is not fought in the boardroom, the marketplace, or the field of open conflict. It is fought in the silent 6-inch battlefield between your ears. For the first, last, and most formidable enemy you will ever face is yourself. The morality of victory, in its ultimate expression, is a pact of ruthless, unyielding warfare against the weaknesses that reside within your own soul. This is the great internal war, and its primary mandate is a calculated mercilessness against your own frailty. The world teaches you to be kind to yourself, to forgive your own shortcomings. The strategist knows this is a siren song leading to the rocks of mediocrity. True self-mastery is built upon a foundation of brutal self-honesty. You must become the supreme commander of your inner world, and like any great commander, you must be willing to make sacrifices. The first traitor to be put to the sword is the ego. Your ego is not your ally. It is a vainglorious subordinate who craves medals and parades, not the quiet, unseen triumph of the mission. It is the part of you that feels the sting of an insult, that aches for recognition, that would rather lose the war while looking good than win it in obscurity. The ego demands you react to slights, defend your honor over trivial matters, and engage in pointless battles of will. It measures success in applause, not in progress. The architect of his own fate learns to starve this entity. He feeds his purpose and lets his ego wither. He lets others take the credit. He absorbs insults as if they were stones dropped into a bottomless well. He understands that every ounce of energy spent placating his ego is an ounce of energy stolen from his primary objective. The victory he seeks is not the fleeting satisfaction of being right, but the permanent reality of having won. The second front in this war is waged against the twin insurgents of hesitation and comfort. They are the saboteurs who whisper sedition in moments of quiet. Later, they murmur, "You've done enough for today." The path of least resistance is wiser. These whispers are the death knell of all great ambitions. The morality of victory is a perpetual moment-to-moment declaration of war against this internal resistance. It is the choice to rise before the sun when the warmth of the bed is a powerful opiate. It is the decision to tackle the most difficult task first, while your will is at its peak. It is the refusal of the cheap dopamine of distraction in favor of the profound fulfillment of deep work. This is the ruthlessness the title speaks of. It is not directed outward at others, but inward at the part of you that is weak, undisciplined, and content with your current limitations. You must become a tyrant to your own lethargy. You must treat your excuses as enemies of the state. Each time you choose discipline over indulgence, you are not merely completing a task. You are winning a battle in this great internal war. You are fundamentally reconditioning your own neurology, forging new pathways of strength and rewiring yourself for relentless execution. This internal campaign requires a third, more painful kind of ruthlessness, the willingness to amputate sentimental attachments. You must audit your life with the cold, detached eye of a field marshal, the friend who drains your energy with his endless negativity, the habit that offers fleeting pleasure but erodes your focus, the outdated belief about yourself that keeps you playing a smaller game. These are not features of your life. They are enemy encampments within your territory. The strategist must be willing to burn them to the ground. This is not an act of cruelty. It is the highest form of loyalty to your own future. The vibrations of this internal war inevitably radiate outward, shaping how the world perceives you. This is how discipline projects a shadow of power. Your self-mastery becomes a palpable presence, an aura that precedes you into any room. People may not be able to articulate it, but they sense it. They feel your unshakable core. Where the reactive man is a transparent vessel of his inner chaos, his face a canvas for his anxiety, his words a broadcast of his insecurities, the master of his inner domain is an enigma. His calmness is not empty. It is a sign of immense contained energy. It is profoundly unsettling to those who operate on the level of emotional manipulation. They have no handholds on you. They cannot find the levers of praise or fear to move you. They look into your eyes and do not see a person they can provoke, but a force they must reckon with. This is the moment you transcend their moral calculus. They stop judging your actions as fair or unfair because your motives have become inscrutable to them. A force of nature is not judged, it is adapted to. A rising tide is not unfair. The coming of winter is not an injustice. When your actions are so deeply and consistently aligned with an internal code of discipline, they begin to appear less like personal choices and more like the inevitable expressions of a natural law. People stop questioning your moves and start anticipating them. They stop trying to beat you at your game and start trying to figure out the rules of the new game you are playing. Your will, forged in the crucible of your inner war, becomes an environmental factor to which they must react. Over time, this projected force solidifies. Every act of self-denial, every moment of disciplined focus, every victory against your internal enemies lays another stone in an impenetrable fortress, your reputation. Sun Tzu spoke of the supreme excellence, which is to subdue the enemy without fighting. This is the ultimate function of your reputation. It is a passive weapon system, an invisible shield that deflects conflict before it can ever reach you. A reputation for unshakable discipline, for calm deliberation, and for relentless execution does your fighting for you. Inferior challengers will not risk the confrontation. They will instinctively recognize that you are not one to be trifled with, not because you are threatening, but because you are profoundly serious. Opportunities will begin to flow toward you, as capital, talent, and influence are naturally drawn to stability and strength. Your reputation becomes a silent filter for your entire life. It repels the dramatic, the parasitic, and the weak. It attracts the ambitious, the effective, and the powerful. Before you ever state your terms in a negotiation, your reputation has already secured you a position of advantage. It is the ultimate strategic asset, built not of gold or steel, but of 1,000 small, unseen victories won in the silent theater of your own mind. You have fought the only war that matters, and in your victory you begin to shape the world. Not through force, but through the undeniable gravity of who you have become. You have learned to forge a new code and to wage the war within. You have faced the only enemy that truly matters and have begun to claim victory. Now, before we reveal how to transform that inner triumph into an unshakable external reality, ensure you are subscribed, for lasting power is the final reward of discipline. The culmination of this entire philosophy is not found in a grand confrontation or a noisy clash of wills. It arrives in a moment of profound, calculated stillness. It is the execution of the decisive stroke. Sun Tzu described this perfectly. The quality of the decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon, which enables it to strike and destroy its victim. Consider this imagery with the depth it deserves. The falcon does not conquer its prey through a protracted, exhausting struggle. It does not engage in a battle of equals. The victory is decided long before the strike. It is decided when the falcon ascends to a great height, conserving its energy, observing the terrain with an unblinking eye. It is decided in its patience, its perfect understanding of the currents of the air, and its absolute certainty of the target's path. The strike itself is merely the final, physical expression of a victory that was already achieved strategically. The falcon's power is not in its talons alone, but in its positioning, its timing, and its singular focus. This is the model for the strategist's decisive action. The years, months, or weeks spent waging the great internal war, cultivating discipline, mastering emotion, sharpening perception, is your ascent. You are accumulating potential energy, while others are down below, scrambling, reacting, and bleeding energy in pointless skirmishes. You are climbing to a position of supreme advantage. Your attack, when it comes, is not a messy brawl. It is the materialization of your will. It could be the launch of a project you have meticulously prepared in silence. It could be the single, unanswerable question posed in a critical meeting. It could be the strategic withdrawal from a situation, causing your adversaries to collapse under the weight of their own aggression. It is often an act of profound simplicity, so swift and so precise that observers do not even recognize it as a move until the new reality has already settled. There is no rage, no violence of spirit. There is only the clean, quiet, and irreversible shift in the balance of power. This is the art of winning without fighting. The opponent is not crushed, he is simply made irrelevant. The obstacle is not destroyed, it is rendered obsolete. The quality of this action is its finality, its elegance. It is the masterstroke that reveals that the game was already over, and you were the only one who had been playing it from the beginning. What follows this decisive moment is the true test of the master. The novice, upon achieving a victory, celebrates. He seeks acclaim. He gloats. He relaxes his guard, believing the war is over. This is a fatal error. The strategist does not celebrate. His reaction to victory is a calm, watchful consolidation. The moment of triumph is not an end, but a beginning. The first day of the new reality you have just created. The strategist's mind is already moving, analyzing the consequences of his action, observing how the other pieces on the board are rearranging themselves in response. His work is to fortify the new position, to establish what Sun Tzu called a lasting peace, a peace, that is, on his own terms. This peace is not born of hope or treaties. It is a peace born of an unassailable position of strength. It is the condition you create, where your reputation, your demonstrated capabilities, and your perceived inscrutability make the very idea of challenging you a foolish and costly proposition for others. The goal is not just to win the battle, but to alter the entire strategic landscape so profoundly that future battles become unnecessary. You do not seek to be feared as a tyrant. You seek to be respected as a fundamental force, one whose trajectory is so clear and whose will is so absolute that it is easier for others to align with it than to oppose it. This is the peace of the deep ocean. Storms may rage on the surface, but in its depths there is an unshakable tranquility. This is the throne that no one dares approach, not because it is surrounded by guards, but because the aura of the one who sits upon it is enough to dissuade all ambition. The power is so complete that it rarely, if ever, needs to be used. And so we arrive at the final unveiled truth. The veil is lifted from the provocative statement that brought you here. Forget fair. Victory is the only morality. You now understand that this was never a license to inflict harm, a permission slip for cruelty, or a guide to becoming a predator. It was a command of the highest possible order to stop harming yourself. It was a call to cease the self-inflicted wounds of adhering to a naive, self-defeating code that the world does not honor. The supreme moral obligation for a being of potential is the realization of that potential. The greatest immorality, from a strategic perspective, is to allow the best version of yourself to die, unexplored and unfulfilled, a casualty of your attachment to illusions. The war was never with others. The victory that matters is not over them, but over the person you were yesterday, the one who was weaker, more hesitant, more undisciplined, more in need of the world's approval. The ultimate power is not the ability to bend others to your will. It is the power to bend your own reality to your purpose. It is the power to achieve a state of such profound self-mastery that the petty squabbles and injustices of the world become distant noise. You have not broken the rules. You have transcended the game. The throne you have built is not for ruling others, but for the perfect and silent sovereignty over yourself. And from that throne, you will find that the world, in its own way, has no choice but to bow.